Can I just pin you down on what happened? Someone's written in, William from Scotland says, what will happen if there's no agreement? What are we talking about here? We're on the last night, probably. I mean, is the choice between a very weak agreement or a weaker one than perhaps all of us or all of you there would like to see, and no agreement? Is no agreement a possibility? My experience from summits is that something is always signed and sealed at the end. So are we getting excited over nothing? There'll be a form of words and the negotiations will continue, or is it really a possibility? I don't know who wants to have a go at that, Tony.
It's quite a complicated equation to work out when a weak deal becomes worse than the no deal, and that's going to be something we have to leave right to the end to look and see whether we've got something there to build on or whether it's going to be worse than nothing. Some things are being gavelled through now as we're speaking, some of the more technical issues. The big pieces that are still on the table are around the kind of process going forward, how binding it will be, who will be involved and what kind of commitments they'll enter into, and then the big pieces there that are still being argued about in terms of the emissions reductions goals that might be broadly indicated from here. Those things we need to get right, and at the end we'll be able to say whether or not it's a good or a bad thing. The other thing to remember about what we're doing here in Bali is that this should be the launch pad for a 2-year process. And so the more we can get set out this evening or tomorrow morning that says the strength of ambition and the ways we're going to do it, the less arguments we'll have later on, and the more then we can devote to the real issues, which is about who's going to do what, how's the burden going to be shared, what will be the mechanisms, and getting all that right. So that is the big question. And
that suggests it's not quite the end game, doesn't it? Because we could, you know, when Bush is out, we could potentially return to this in a year and a half, or in Copenhagen essentially in 2009, and do a deal then starting from a lower baseline, if you like.
But the likelihood of getting a deal in Copenhagen, I think, diminishes in direct proportion to how vague it is coming from here. So the more we get here, the more chance we've got. Because by the time Bush has gone, 1 year and I think I'm right in saying 39 days, I'm counting, that still only leaves then less than 12 months between him going and the Copenhagen summit, which means a new American administration, I think, would have a big, complicated job on its hands in coming to the table by then. So the more we can get done now, with Bush in office, the more we can isolate and pressurize his team here to accept the deal that everybody else wants, then I think the better it will be later on. But you're right, you know, it's not the end here. But the clock is ticking on global warming, and the more we waste, the more danger we create.
Sorry, Martin Hillis, just coming in.
Totally with both of you. One point cannot be stressed enough. There is an agenda here which includes a number of important items that need to be discussed in the next 2 years. Items that fall off this agenda now, it's going to be very difficult to get them on again. So that's really these talks here. I find very often that when you say, it is the beginning of 2 years talks, then everybody thinks, my God, they're going to talk for 2 years. But the important thing is these are over 190 countries, over 190 governments which need to explain this to over 190 peoples in their countries, how they're actually going to change the economy. And it's fundamental because we change the way how we produce energy and how we use energy. So 2 years is actually not very long. But the starting point here needs to be crafted really well so that we know what we're doing during these 2 years and that we know where we are going. And this is, the devil is in the detail, and exactly that's where the devil is hitting at the moment, if I may say so.
Okay, I think we've got more questions coming in than we've ever had before, so I want to keep pressing them, even if it means jumping around a bit. Oh, this is obviously for you, Mark, as a journalist and writer. Isn't the US media a problem? Because surely US citizens could get rid of Bush sooner if they were better educated about the realities. Some of these are big, sweet questions.
Well, I mean, it would be better put to some of the US media who are here, actually, because there's people from, I don't know, New York Times, all of the main Washington Post, LA Times, and they've all been in the press conferences that we've been in, and they're no less well educated than everyone else about this. I mean, they fully understand all of the technical details. It's a matter of how they can report these things in a way which people will actually find useful, because it is very technical, and it's very difficult to actually try and communicate what is actually going on here and why it's so important. But I think there's been a big shift in US politics, despite I mean, the media is a big corporate beast, but remember, the corporations are changing. Rupert Murdoch has now instructed his entire global empire to cover global warming.
And carbon neutral.
Yeah, and go carbon neutral. So, I mean, there's a shifting landscape here, which the media is not, I don't think, holding back. I mean, you could see, Al Gore's film was probably the tipping point here, because that woke up a lot of people and it legitimized concern about climate change on the domestic political front. I mean, it's possible that you'll see another Australia situation here, where it becomes such a big election issue that the new government wins on the strength of its position on climate change. I mean, that would be wonderful if it did happen.
Possibly the USA is next.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Exactly. There could be a sort of a domino effect of climate change here, where every government, Canada would also be subject to this. Every government which holds out against global warming is eventually swept away by angry voters. I'd love to see that.
Well, I think in the case of Canada, probably some prime ministers have sort of hitched their star to the Bush wagon and are going to be left rather beached, actually, when Bush goes. And I think Canada's one example. Now, the mastermind, I'm just a good-looking anchor here, but there's a mastermind, Jeffrey Allen, behind the camera, has reminded. Please, you can blog your thoughts on oneclimate.net as well. That's what that website is for, so please do that. Can I keep it moving? Just keep throwing questions at you because they're so interesting. Delia from the USA. Are there good ways of measuring what a country, locality and particular company is spewing into the atmosphere? If so, can we publicize and shame those who are abusers and praise the innovators? Oh, well, Tony's making muttering noises there, so I'll give it to you first.
Disclosure of basic environmental information is a campaign that we've run at Friends of the Earth for many years. We had a small success in the UK last year in at least elevating some of the rules that company directors have to respond to in publishing this kind of material. But they are notoriously, reluctant to put into the public domain exactly how much carbon dioxide and other pollutants they're pumping out. And I think what we need is moving beyond the voluntary place we're at the moment in most countries, where companies can or can't, if they wish, say something about their environmental impact. A nice glossy report, very carefully massaged with nice pictures of whales and dolphins, on top of a litany of grief about an oil company's impact. I mean, this is the way it works. What we need is a much more systematic, legally underpinned route towards getting information disclosed so we can make comparisons between firms. So, for example, if you're an investor in the stock market and you want to start making some decisions about who's the best oil company on global warming, may sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but it isn't, because some companies are better than others. The first thing you need as an investor is some good comparable information. So Shell is claiming this and BP is claiming that. Actually, which one is the best? This is a really quite important part of how the market could work in the future. And so we need that information out there, and certainly campaigners would be using this, of course, to be saying these firms are better than these ones. But there's a real hard economic side to it as well, whereby we can begin to shift the way in which investment patterns are flowing. Because at the moment, investors are really just banking on which firm is giving the biggest return. And I think as we go forward, this is not going to be the only criterion, because in the end, everyone can see the kind of analysis that's coming from the Stern Review and elsewhere about the disastrous failure of short-term economics, and the stock market system epitomizes it, looking at 3-4 months returns from companies. We've got to move on that, and that kind of information is crucial.